Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think I know who leaked that Huawei stuff. I've double-sourced it. No, I don't think anyone's going to go public with it until it's absolutely kosher. But if you were to cite, bearing in mind that Chris Grayling has absolutely nothing to do with the National Security Council, so rule him out immediately. If you were to cite general incompetence as being the biggest qualification needed to be guilty of this particular offence, you probably would be able to narrow the field down fairly effectively. And that is all I'm going to say. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. I quite like John Bercow. I don't know if that'll come as a massive shock to you. The thing I like most about John Bercow, oddly, is his transformation. He used to be a member of the Monday Club. I don't know if you're old enough to remember when being far-right was frowned upon in this country rather than rewarded with all manner of baubles and media appearances, even your own radio show. But back in the day, the Monday Club was far-right and fairly shameful. It operated in the darker fringes of the Conservative Party. And Bercow was a fully paid-up member. He's been on quite a journey since. Many people, I don't know the man at all, many people credit his wife with being part of that process. She enjoyed a brief foray in the British media as a colourful and slightly controversial figure, but she very much leans in the opposite direction politically. It's probably a little simplistic to suggest that she somehow showed him the light, but he certainly would struggle to be accepted for membership of the Monday Club now. They seem supremely relaxed about people who weren't born with exactly the same skin colour and ethnic background as he was. But I think he might have got this wrong. I also bow to very few people when it comes to my disdain for Dirty Donald. I think that Dirty Donald is one of the most despicable and disgusting individuals ever to hold public office in a free country in my lifetime. And yet, when Betty Boothroyd, that's to bring in the three figures, so you got Betty Boothroyd, Dirty Donald and John Bercow, and now I'm going to put me in as the fourth corner of this square, because one of the maddest things that's happened to me in the last few weeks, months, years, is standing on a stage shortly after Betty Boothroyd had left it. If you told me a couple of years ago that I'd be enjoying that sort of experience, I'd have laughed in your face, but it was recently at a People's Vote convention. Betty Boothroyd delivered an utterly barnstorming speech. It was just magical to witness, especially as the child of Yorkshiremen, a Yorkshireman and a Yorkshire woman. There's something about Betty Boothroyd's presence that speaks to me of an old Labour, a pre-Blair Labour, a million miles away from Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, but also, I don't know, more in touch with what I always considered left-wing values to be. An essentially Christian attitude of just trying to frame a society in a way that recognises those who most need help, or gives help to those who most need help, rather than where we seem to have ended up, which is trying to build our society in a way that makes life easier for plutocrats, oligarchs, and extremely wealthy business people. And then how do they reward us? By moving everything to Singapore. But you see what I mean about Betty Boothroyd. So she gave a speech. She's squarely in favour of a second referendum. She rightly considers that Brexit will be a disaster for precisely the communities that I've just identified as being most in need of help. The less you have, the less money you have, less job security you have, then the more likely you are to be hit hardest by Brexit. So she made no bones about her position on that particular issue. But she has told John Bercow to get over himself, although she would use much more articulate phraseology than that, with his determination to prevent Donald Trump, the American president, from speaking to the British Parliament in June. And it's made me change my mind, I think. I've read her words. I always read the words, not just the headlines. And the headline in this is pretty self-explanatory. Betty tells Bercow you're out of order over Trump's visit. And what I want to try to do now is draw that, what's the word I want? The distinction between the office and the man. And I don't know how it works, because I also, and I may need to abandon this, I really admire Vince Cable for saying that he won't go to the banquet. Donald Trump courts white supremacists, courts Nazis, locks up children, separates them from their parents. He's disgusting. He's despicable. But if you feel that he's given you a green light or a kind of free pass to publicly reveal your basest, nastiest thoughts, I understand why you like him. You spent 20 or 30 years being told you can't say that in public because it's disgusting, racist and bigoted. And now Donald Trump's come along saying all the things you've spent 20 or 30 years being told you couldn't say in public. You can boast about sexually assaulting women. You can lie like it's going out of fashion. I get it. It's incredibly liberating for people. So Vince Cable makes a personal decision, right, not to attend the state banquet, which I really admire. I don't know what Corbyn will do. Corbyn could be a number 10 by the time he visits in June. Stranger things have happened, although that is particularly unlikely. And I thought it was the same about addressing Parliament. I thought it was the same principle. Betty Boothroyd has really made me think that it isn't. I'm not 100% on the other side of the line here, and you might want to steer. You may well be able to steer me back. But I'll read you what she says, and then I'll tell you why I thought yesterday that John Bercow was right and Betty Boothroyd was wrong. So, very simply, she says, no speaker should indulge himself in personalities and whom he approves or disapproves. Speakers must always remember they are the servant of the House and not its master. She insists it's Parliament's duty to stand with the President as he visits the country to commemorate the US and British forces who fought alongside each other on D-Day. And this is where the dichotomy between the office and the man currently holding the office becomes so absolutely fascinating, because Donald Trump's history with the military is, like everything else on his record, utterly disgusting. He bailed, of course, on a World War I armistice ceremony in France last November because it was raining. And he can't, with his hair, he can't risk rain or wind because his hair is such an interesting confection that strong wind or heavy rain is his worst nightmare. He's a little bit like the Wicked Witch at the end of The Wizard of Oz. I'm melting. His hair will melt if he finds himself in inclement weather. And he prioritised that above commemorating the sacrifice of the fallen in France in November of last year. He also, of course, reserved particularly vile rhetoric for the parents of an American army captain who was killed during the Iraq War. So they're known as Gold Star families. The families of a soldier killed in action in America are known as Gold Star families. And until Donald Trump became president, they were widely respected and revered as being the makers of the ultimate sacrifice. Donald Trump, of course, chose to mock and insult the parents of Humayun Khan, Khizr and Ghazala. So you've got that as well. Then you've got his own draft dodging. I thought of Donald Trump oddly while watching Godfather 2 the other night. I saw Godfather 2 on a big screen, which was a real treat. And there's a scene, it's a flashback scene near the end of Godfather 2, which flashes back, I think, to Godfather 1. Although I haven't seen Godfather 1 for ages, so I don't know whether it was actually in the original film. And they're all joking about dodging the draft. And Sonny, the oldest son of Don Corleone, says to Michael, the youngest son, who goes on to take over the empire, of course, he says, well, if you feel that way, why don't you go and join the army and go out there and do it then? The joke being that if you're rich and powerful and morally corrupt, you don't have to ever join the army, even if there is a draft, even if there is a requirement to do so. Except Michael has done. He doesn't end up, spoiler alert, doesn't end up great, but at that point he is the face of principle. He is the morally pure son of the mafioso who's determined to follow a righteous path. And it reminded me, of course, about Dirty Donald's bone spurs, the sort of strange condition which apparently precluded him from going to Vietnam. John McCain, of course, went to Vietnam, got captured, spent years imprisoned, and got insulted by Dirty Donald Trump subsequently because he prefers his war heroes who don't get captured. Presumably, if he comes to commemorate D-Day, he'll stand up and say, I prefer my war heroes not to get killed. So he's disgusting, right? That's clear. There's three very clear examples there. Ducking out on an armistice ceremony because it would have messed up his hair. Dodging the draft with regard to Vietnam. Insulting John McCain, a prisoner of war, and insulting the families. I should have mentioned he was Muslim, the captain that got killed in Iraq in 2004. Make of that what you will. So I felt yesterday or the day before, that what we had here was somebody who had no business, in a sense, representing the war dead. And I was right. He doesn't, as a human, as an individual, as a person, as a man. But he is the occupant of the Oval Office, right? He is the President of America. And Americans made great sacrifices during the First and Second World War. Even post-Pearl Harbor, the sacrifices could have been construed as having been made in protection of their allies. The likelihood of German or Nazi or Japanese forces mounting any form of invasion of the American continent, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not a historian, but we're always very slim. So that is, for my money, the very definition of a conundrum. Can somebody who has behaved so despicably towards the military, either the dead of previous wars or the survivors from his own side or the dead in Iraq, and who, of course, dodged the draft, can that individual be excluded from commemorations involving honourable men whose moral compasses point in precisely the opposite direction to wherever Dirty Donald's compass is pointing today? And I would yesterday have said, no, you can't. How dare he? And I would have said we had a sort of democratic duty to uphold the memory and the sanctity of the fallen and the sacrificed. And that he, by routinely urinating all over their legacy and their memory, has no business standing up in our parliament pretending to care. But he's the President of the United States of America. And Betty Boothroyd's right. The Speaker doesn't get to make this call. If Parliament made the call, that would be very different, wouldn't it? But I don't think John Bercow's got any business saying that Donald Trump can't address Parliament to commemorate the US and British forces who fought alongside each other on D-Day. I really don't. I'd love to know what you think, especially if you're military. It's a tough one, this.
Margaret Boyd.
Panel. I see in the press that we're expecting a visit from Donald Trump, and I'm thinking this is a good idea, and I welcome it. What does the panel think?
You welcome it, Margaret. Caroline, I don't think you do.
Well, I was hoping we'd get to a question where we could all kind of come together, but I don't think we've chosen the right one, because I'm afraid I don't agree with you. I think that it is extraordinary that the Prime Minister is going to be rolling out the red carpet for Donald Trump, who is, frankly, a bigot and a bully. He's a racist and a misogynist.
I'd say, of course, Donald Trump is not here to answer himself, but I think that's self-evident.
But he's also, as the Mueller report showed, a serial liar and a fantasist, and he's also someone who says that climate change is a Chinese hoax. So I don't think it's a great idea to give him a state visit. I don't have a problem with him coming from an ordinary meeting and having a chat. But I don't think it is right that we are going to be rolling out the red carpet for a man of his values. He's no friend of Britain as far as I am concerned. Yes, there are the D-Day celebrations and commemorations going on, but indeed the leader of Portsmouth City Council, where they're going to be taking place, has said that he would rather they didn't come there because it will overshadow the day that's meant to be focusing on veterans, not on Donald Trump. So, you know, the fact that we've got, unfortunately, in this country, rather a history of welcoming all kinds of despots and dictators, doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to change our behaviour in future. And I think starting with Donald Trump would be a very good idea.
I assume, Victoria, you do think... No, honestly, don't call out, because I can't really hear you and the audience at home can't hear you, so it's a waste of hot air, just coming back to the first thing we were talking about. Victoria, I presume you think this is a good idea?
Well, look, there are things that Donald Trump has said, both in his campaign and since, that I simply do not agree with. I think his views on climate change, some of the views he's expressed about women, about Muslim people and so on, I do not agree with them. But we have to acknowledge that he was elected by the American people as the President of the United States. And it kind of goes back to what we've just been talking about. We can't pick and choose which democratic decisions we abide by. He is the first citizen of the US. The United States have fought with us in world wars. They have continued their support on all sorts of levels. They are our closest, strongest ally. And for the sake of the office and of the good people of America, I think we must welcome President Trump, particularly on what will be an enormous occasion in our national history, the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings. We must please show that we as a country respect our history, we respect democracy in other countries, and that we will, welcome him. There may well be lively debate about it whilst he's here, but again, that's part of our democracy, and I hope he'll respect that as we will respect his democracy.
Yeah, yeah.
John Ashton.
I think the United Kingdom and the United States have many shared values which we fostered over many years. Our commitment to freedom, our commitment to liberty, our internationalism, our respect for human rights. But I think Donald Trump has undermined and systematically attacked those values.
So
He's
will
a man...
the Labour government not invite him for a state visit?
I don't believe he should have a state visit. Of course, I understand that the President of the United States has to come to the United Kingdom. I can't deny that. But I don't believe that a man who has separated migrant children from their parents at the border, who has imposed a ban on Muslims, or tried to impose a ban on Muslims entering the country, who denies climate change, who is, as Caroline says, a chauvinist and a bigot, a sexist and a racist, that we should be rolling out the red carpet. And I wish he certainly shouldn't be given all the pomp and ceremony of addressing Parliament. There's no reason why presidents of the United States should automatically address Parliament. And our Prime Minister should stand up to him. But my fear is she won't, because she wants to sign a trade deal with him and sell off our NHS. Our NHS should not be for sale to Donald Trump.
What do you mean she wants to sell the NHS to Donald Trump?
Because they want to get big US private healthcare providers involved in our NHS, and we need to protect a public, universal national health service, and the Prime Minister, Theresa May, should stand up to Donald Trump, not be welcoming him in with open arms.
The woman here at the front in the blue jacket.
Yes, thank you. So I completely agree. It's extremely problematic to invite Donald Trump with everything that he said, his viewpoints. It's true that we do sometimes have world leaders who are also problematic, though, so I think that's something we need to think about. Yeah. But one thing we haven't considered is we started the programme talking about climate change and our government's commitment to climate change, they say, but now we're having Donald Trump such a short time after that when we know what his viewpoints are. I find that, really, really bad timing, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not the man, it's the office, though, isn't it? The man is the man. He is who he is. We can't change him. It's the office of the President of the United States. It's for the future. 4 years will be gone.
So is
and the next one will come on.
Our climate is for the future. The decisions he's
the
making
Greens will
right
be
now...
next anyway, because nobody's going to vote for the rest of them.
The decisions he's making right now are having an impact on the future. He's making decisions right now.
So. Man there in the sweater.
So are we.
Yes. You, sir.
I think, well, firstly, I think climate change is a natural phenomenon, and I think human beings are exacerbating it, partly because of our population, but also because of our manufacturing. But to blame it on the West is very short-sighted. China is probably the largest contributor. Hang on, we're talking about Donald Trump's visit.
I know, but you moved on a little bit.
The lady before linked it to it.
Okay.
With the
but do you
Paris
think Donald
Accord.
Trump should be accorded?
He definitely should. Yeah, he's the best. He's one of the best presidents they've had in the last 50 years.
Surprising statement.
The young woman here.
I've got GCSE exams on the day that Donald Trump's coming to England, so
You've got, sorry, I didn't catch it. Your which exam?
GCSE exams.
Oh, good luck.
So I won't be able to be there to protest, although I would love to. But I do think that I remember going protesting against Theresa May, bombing Syria to get into bed with Donald Trump, and I don't think it's entirely surprising that, we're inviting a racist and bigot and everything over to the UK.
He says it's right to be here.
The man there in the blue shirt and jacket. Yes, you sir in the glasses.
Yes. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, if this country was attacked by a hostile foreign power, we'd soon be welcoming him with open arms then.
I'm sure he'll come to our
You
aid.
sir in the glasses.
He would.
Me, even though we're inviting Donald Trump over to the UK, I did hear on the grapevine that he was not prepared to do a trade deal with the UK unless we were out of Europe.
Well, he's talked about it being difficult. He's talked about it being difficult.
That's
I'm not
right.
sure he's been
Exactly.
that black and white about it. Vince
Well,
Gill.
just to answer the last point first, I mean, Trump isn't in a position to deliver a trade deal. No. It's got to be approved by Congress, and the American Congress have made it clear they will not approve a trade deal with the UK if it damages the relationship with Ireland through Brexit. So, you know, that is a practical problem. But on the basic issue, we've really got to distinguish between the idea of having a perfectly sensible, business-like visit with somebody who is a democratically elected leader of America. That's fine. As opposed to having a state visit, going around in the royal carriages, dragging in the monarchy, all the pomp and ceremonial. Why are we doing that?
But why shouldn't we have him visit? If we've had President Putin, he's had a state visit.
Clinton
King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, Chinese President Xi Jinping has had a state visit. But these people have had state visits, so why should Donald Trump not have one?
Actually, very few American presidents have had state visit. But the problem is that the whole idea of the state visit has been utterly debased. I mean, we've had this run of appalling characters from Ceausescu and Mobutu and Mugabe. I mean, why do we do this? We disrespecting the Queen by getting her to associate with these people.
We are, indeed.
And in this particular case, I mean, I think I do agree with a lot of the sentiments about Trump. I mean, you know, the attitude towards women is a good example. In the week that we're inviting him on a state visit, he's using an American veto in the United Nations to stop rape being regarded as a war crime. Yeah. And that is just unfortunately typical of what he's doing. I mean, I've been put on the spot because I've been invited to the Royal Banquet.
Boycott it.
Are you going to go, Vince? Come on.
I regard it as an honour to be invited to the Queen's event.
So are you going to go?
I did, but no, I won't go, and I've declined it. And I also... And I also turned down an invite to have dinner with the King of Saudi Arabia for the same reason. But no, and I think we should get into the habit of treating with honour and respect foreign visitors who deserve it. And I'm afraid he isn't in that category.
Presumably, Jeremy Corbyn must have been invited as well.
Oh my God.
And
I've got absolutely no idea.
Well,
if he's been invited.
given what you just said about Trump, do you think he should not go along to the state banquet?
I suspect he won't go. I mean, I don't know if he's been invited, but I'd be surprised if he went. I mean, I wouldn't go if I was in his shoes.
John, what do you make of all this? Do you think
I was in Indianapolis
for
the Indiana primary, and I stayed on for a few days and talked to some of the, you know, the organisers and people like that on both sides. And then I drove from Indianapolis to Cleveland and then down to Fort Lauderdale. It took about 10 days. I took a very careful note of the people that I was talking to, of how they were going to vote. And the horrifying thing was, so many of them looked at me with that deep suspicion, who is this Hollywood guy who's going to sneer at whatever we say? And that really annoyed me. Of the 92 people I talked to in motels and bars and restaurants and things like that, only 2 were going to vote for Hillary Clinton. The reason is simple. People in government have stopped listening to the real fears of ordinary people. And it's all right to say he's anti-migrant. Homeland is projecting this year that 1.2 million illegal migrants will come into America. Now, If this goes on, America changes very radically. The question that I would make every politician answer is, do you guys believe that a country has the right to limit or refuse entry to people? And the second part of that...
John, in fairness, though, the idea is to answer the questions from the audience. And the question is, do you think Donald Trump should be afforded a state visit here?
He's the head of he's an elected head of state of a great democracy, the last best hope for mankind, if you ask me.
We're in a...
And he represents the American people.
No, he doesn't. He lost the popular vote. He lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes.
Do you not? Have you ever read Kenneth Arrow and Arrow's theorem? Any system of election has its problems.
Yes, the American one and ours more than most.
I'm going to take 2 very quick points from the audience because our time is very nearly up. Yes,
read Arrow's theorem,
young woman
please, somebody.
That seem to be repeated is that if there is a problem, it does not mean it has to stay. Changes can happen to remove those problems, but you insist and you keep going back to the MPs about the same thing, is that don't fix it if it's broken or whatever this theory is. But at this point in time, it is broken. A lot of things are broken, and the decision with Donald Trump, you're saying that migrants, and we should have the option to stop people coming to the country. If you do not mess with those other countries, if you do not cause problems there, they would not flee. They are fleeing because they are being pushed out.
I'm going to stop it, John. John, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to stop it there, I'm afraid, because our time is up.
It's Betty Boothroyd versus John Bercow, but you know how this programme works. It's not a question of which one you historically feel more affinity for or disdain for. It's a specific question about a specific issue, and the specific issue is one I think I got wrong. My initial reaction was that John Bercow was right, a man who routinely maligns the military, who's insulted John McCain, a former prisoner of war, who's insulted a Gold Star family, the parents of a captain killed in Iraq in 2004, who dodged the draft 5 times, who ducked out of an armistice ceremony in France last November because he was worried about his hair. He's got no business standing up in the British Parliament and pretending to care about soldiers who died on D-Day, or who fought on D-Day. It's not just a commemoration of the fallen, is it? It's a commemoration of the action. But when Betty Boothroyd says no speaker should indulge himself in personalities in whom he approves or disapproves, I kind of find myself nodding along, with the caveat that I also approve of Vince Cable's decision not to attend any state banquet that might be thrown for the president who boasts about sexually assaulting women. For me, that would be enough, but as you know, there were a million occasions in the run-up to that presidential election where I thought that my fellow humans would unanimously join together in disapproval and disgust, but it turns out we live alongside people who are quite cool with men boasting about sexually assaulting women and mocking disabled people in public and lying thousands and thousands of times, proven on the record, and I just was very, very naive. David's in Hammersmith. David, what do you reckon?
Hello, James.
Hello,
I don't like it when politicians weaponise the celebration of what we've achieved. You and I have spoken before. I'm, as you know, I'm a fireman and a black cab driver in Hammersmith.
Here he is.
And yeah, I'm ex-military as well. I don't know if
I think you mentioned that when I signed the book for you, Dave.
You did. Thank you very much. It's now pride of place in my book place. Thank you very much.
I had a fella the other day who'd been carrying it around for 5 months, hoping I was going to get into his cab one day, and there it was.
Do you know what's even worse? I've now got to buy it again because I don't want to actually read it. Because now you've signed it, I don't want to actually spoil the spine.
So you silly old sausage. Well, get a paperback's out in June, mate. I'll stick one in the post for you. Go on, where were we?
No worries, yes, no, I just don't like it when politicians weaponise the celebration of what we've achieved. I don't think it's right, and I think if people want to celebrate, you know, our achievements in the military, then you know they shouldn't really be, you know, using it as a political thing.
Well, who is Burko? I mean, listen, 1968, age 22, Donald J. Trump, 6'2", athletic build, football, tennis, squash, just taken up golf, medical history was unblemished, routine, apart from a routine appendectomy when he was 10 years old. Astonishingly, by the time he graduated in the spring of 1968, he received a diagnosis that would change his entire life. Bone spurs in his heels. Mate, the man's a coward and a creep. So he stands up to commemorate the fallen in the Second World War, really?
Do you know, I don't agree with Donald Trump, and I don't agree with his views, and I don't. But what I disagree with more is people when they're saying, "Look, our military are really good. Thank you very much for all you've done."
Yes.
No matter where you're from, you should respect that part of it. That's what I think.
Right, well, I think you're right for what it's worth. I'm having a swing, but then what about all the other stuff? John McCain? Prisoner of war, suffered terribly. I prefer my prisoners not to get caught, or so my military heroes not to get caught. Humayun Khan's parent killed in Iraq in 2004. He mocked them publicly, insulted them in public. The armistice ceremony, World War I, he didn't go because it would have messed up his hair. I mean, how bad would an individual have to be in order for their personality to eclipse the office when it comes to an occasion like this?
Do you know, I remember the hair one. It was raining or something, wasn't it?
Didn't go. Stayed in his hotel.
Yeah, no, I do remember that. And I was very frustrated at the time. Again, then you could say that the press are military or weaponising the celebration of the achievements that we've done. And you know, I know you personally don't, because you're very much, a person who celebrates our armed forces. But, you know, some people in the press would grab at any story. And I think they're two separate issues.
Yeah, I do as well. I just can't. I'm not very good at separating them today.
Yeah, I know, and I don't like it when it comes across in a bad way. I mean, with you know, myself included, and more have done a lot more than I have.
So we see him. We have to see him as a representative because of his job, because of his office. He is a representative of the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us, regardless of how disgusting he is as an individual. He is a representative.
Okay, there are some boundaries where you cannot cross. I mean, you wouldn't have if he was a criminal, if he was a convicted whatever. Bank robber, paedophile, you know, you can't have those people representing, because they're, you know, there is a line to be drawn. But I don't think, as he is a head of a state, you know, probably the most powerful nation in the world, you've got to let him have that bit, because he's not coming along with any political views. He's actually just saying, guys, thank you very much for your help, thank you very much for my services' help. And that's all we're celebrating.
And I wonder if we're looking at it through the wrong end of the telescope, because even if he's lying, which he will be, he doesn't care about anything or anyone except himself. If it was, if you'd lost someone in the Second World War, and then they told you that your president wasn't allowed to speak to the British House, would you care who the president was? I'm not sure you would. You'd feel affronted. No. You'd feel insulted. You'd feel offended.
My granddad got shot in the bum on the D-Day landing. He's passed away now, bless him. But yeah, he was only on the beach for about 3 minutes.
He didn't sit down for a week.
He didn't, no, but that's another story. Anyway,
I look forward to hearing it, Dave. Next time I'm in the back of the cab, I shall be all ears. Thank you, mate. Mind how you go. 0345 606 0973. I think I would need a better explanation than I've managed to muster of why he shouldn't be allowed to speak to Parliament. Burko, remember, it was back in 2017. I don't know if he's revisited this since, because in the context of it being a D-Day commemoration, he might have changed his position might be different. He said in 2017 that he was strongly opposed to a presidential address, but that presidential address in 2017 would not have been contingent upon a D-Day commemoration. And the reason why he was strongly opposed to a presidential address obviously included Burko's opposition to racism and sexism. It's an earned honour, he claimed. That's perfect for me. It's an earned honour for the American president to address the House of Commons, but the honour in this case has been earned by the soldiers on D-Day, right? Regardless of what despicable conduct the current president may have been responsible for. And if you know Joe Biden, tell him, Dirty Donald, that's the way to play this guy, all right? Don't, he says, sleepy Joe Biden. Just call him Dirty Donald. Every debate, everywhere you Dirty Donald, Dirty Donald, Dirty Donald, because it works. And the great lesson for enlightened liberals in the last few years is that sometimes you've got to come down to these people's level, because if their tactics work with the public, then copy the tactics. Just be a bit more honest about it. Donald Trump is dirty. Joe Biden is not sleepy. So that's what you do. You know, he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. A little bit of mild racism back in the public mainstream. It's fantastic for racists. That's how you deal with him. Dirty Donald. And tell Joe Biden to send the invoice to Keith. Michael's in Salisbury. Michael, what would you like to say? Michael! I think Michael's been taken prisoner. We shall return to him imminently. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. I think you'll have to be getting up early today to persuade me that he shouldn't be able to speak to the House of Commons. And given that I speak as somebody who holds Donald Trump in the very lowest regard, I hope that that's a challenge that you will rise to. It is that phrase there, isn't it? That crucial phrase there. He should be welcomed as a representative of the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us. Betty Boothroyd goes further. She says the Speaker has responsibility. He also has duty. Those in authority often have to carry out duties they may find unsavoury, but responsibility also brings with it duty. And I think that also explains why Vince Cable is right not to attend any state dinner, because he doesn't have authority in the context of government, and therefore he doesn't have duty. Kevin is in Luton. Kevin, what would you like to say?
Hi. So I don't think he should be allowed to address Parliament, but probably not for the reasons John Bercow gave.
Go on.
So if I recall correctly, I think John Bercow cited racism, sexism and equality as the reasons not to allow him to address Parliament.
Yeah.
But given the timing of the visit and the ongoing Brexit issue, I think there's a real risk that he could try and influence Parliament one way or the other in terms
he wouldn't dare,
the final...
would he?
Well...
To stand up in the House of Commons and start trying to score cheap political points? Oh, hang on, I forgot who we were talking about. I forgot who we were talking about for a minute.
And I think there's a real risk. I guess he would probably come down on a pro-Brexit side, which would leave the Remainers in the House saying, OK, well, who's going to now address the House?
No, they'd be outraged. People like Farage would be furious if an American president came over here and expressed an opinion about domestic British politics. You remember how cross they were with Barack Obama? You're not suggesting these people are massive hypocrites and liars, are you, Kevin?
But it would be outrageous to suggest that Farage and Trump share any type of shared views.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think there's a real constitutional risk here, and it's the risk of, we've been citing
but you can't
external influence from Russia on elections, and now we're inviting an external influence into the House of Commons on one of the most critical periods in the country's history in terms of constitutional crisis.
Yeah, but you salute the rank, not the man.
You do, but it's not about the rank or the man. It's about...
It is about the rank. He's Commander-in-Chief.
The sovereignty of Parliament.
He's the man we all say hail to.
So is there a need for him to address Parliament to pay tribute to the fallen...
Well, then the question becomes, would any other president be prevented from doing so? And the answer to that is no, they wouldn't be. I know that he's uniquely unpleasant, uniquely vile, but... the office remains the same regardless of who's in it. I see where you're coming from, but this phrase here is what undid me. He should be welcomed as a representative of the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us, said Betty Boothroyd, the previous speaker.
And any other presidents from any other countries been invited to address Parliament?
Yeah, Barack Obama did in 2011.
No, but in this particular, in relation to these celebrations... French died, Dutch died, Polish died. As far as I'm aware, the leaders of none of those other countries have been invited to address Westminster.
Well, I don't know if that again. I'm not being devil's advocate. I don't know that that's I don't know that that's enough. I really don't. Although I hear you, and it's always a little bit lazy sometimes to reach for the most extreme examples of leaders who we probably wouldn't have countenanced addressing Parliament, even though they were democratically elected. I suppose most obviously you'd say Adolf Hitler. Chamberlain flew across the world to cozy up to Hitler long after the depths of Nazi depravity had become clear, but the rationale was back in Blighty that, well, he doesn't wish us any harm, so we can let him do whatever he wants to that lot. Trump's not on that page. He might be heading towards it, might not be. I think we should all hope he isn't. But there would be, I think the point I'm making, there would be a point at which we'd probably mostly agree that that line had been crossed, and he has lost the right to address Parliament, even as a representative of the American people. And then you find yourself wondering, well, what else would he have to do? You know? Cozying up to white supremacists, mocking disabled people, locking up babies after separating them from their children, lying several times a day. That's just since becoming president. Back before he was president, mocking the parents of a dead captain in the American army, mocking John McCain's military service and imprisonment, mocking, just to keep it military. You'd also, after being elected, ducking out of a commemoration service in France because the weather would have made his hair look even more ridiculous than usual. What would he have to do if you think he should be on side? Can you take a moment to think about what he'd have to do to lose the right to represent the American people who sent, to use Betty Boothroyd's words, I keep wanting to add in brackets and daughters, but I don't think that it necessarily applies actually in the context of military service in the 1940s at the front line, but the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us. Johnny's in Peckham. Johnny, what would you like to say?
Hi there. First of all, it's my first time calling, so
you're very welcome. You're my first female Johnny, so it's a double of debuts. Hello.
Hey. So I'd just like to say that I think your show is fabulous, and I have been listening for many years, and I just.
And this is the one. This is the one that tempted you to pick up the phone.
This is the one that brought me to call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I absolutely am so thrilled that Burkhoff has said no to the possibility of Trump speaking in Parliament. In my view, I mean, you can hear I'm an American, and my father and mother, for that matter, but I'm from a military family. They're buried in Arlington National Cemetery and so on and so forth. Anyway, the thing is that Trump has already proved zillions of reasons why he shouldn't speak. There's nothing more he needs to do. He's done enough to explain why he shouldn't be there. And in my view, to speak in Parliament is a privilege. It's not a right. And it's a privilege that the British people bestow on whoever they want to bestow it on. And it has nothing to do with whether or not he represents the U.S. or doesn't represent the U.S. or whatever he's doing with himself. It has to do with the privilege of this country having the wherewithal to invite people into a house that sanctifies democracy. And I think that it's not rocket science that this man is doing everything he can to alter the Constitution, as you were saying before, locking up children, separating from the parents. Really, it's just like the list is kind of endless, although the hair story, I didn't know about that one. I thought it was hilarious. But there's nothing that makes sense about inviting him in except for some kind of really smarmy economic scenario that we know they're not going to go for anyway if the U.S. the UK.
Well, that's not the reason we've been exploring, and I know what you're saying, this notion that there's some trade arrangements that could be preferential to the United Kingdom is a balloon, one of the few balloons of Brexit that hasn't popped humiliatingly yet, but it will. But that's not the reason they've given. The reason they've given is, as Betty Boothroyd says, he should be welcomed as a representative of the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us. And I mean, I've got a heart and head conflict going on because my heart agrees with you completely. He's done more than enough to be excluded forever from polite society. But he is not excluded from polite society. He's the leader of the free world. He's the president of the United States of America, despite being disgusting and despicable. And it pains me to point out and to remind you there are plenty of people here who are not troubled by his racism or his sexism or his misogyny or his boasting about sexual abuse or his mocking disabled people or his mocking war dead. I mean, they're not bothered by him. They still think he's, I don't know what word to use, they still think he's decent.
Yeah, that's still not an argument for, and I respect Betty Boothroyd. I think she was fabulous, Speaker of the House. But on this occasion, she's incorrect because it is true that at the moment he's the elected representative of the people of the U.S. Hopefully that won't last long, but probably it will.
I think it probably will.
Populism. But anyway, that's another matter.
And Russian interference and Cambridge Analytica and the weaponization of lies and the fact that, it turns out people aren't as freaked out by racism in the level that we thought they would be.
But I think that, first of all, wherever possible, we have a duty of care. And the duty of care is to try and get some form of the truth out, which is that this person has brought disrepute to the highest office in the U.S., in the land, possibly in the world, and that while one doesn't have to, go extreme and say, call for his, being jailed like he was doing with Hillary, and that famous Hillary quote.
Yeah, good
I
point.
do think it's important to get the message out on social media, in whatever way possible, that this is not acceptable behavior. And one of the best ways of doing this is to not allow him the privilege of speaking in the House. Yes, he is a representative. Nobody's denying the fact.
But that decision is in the gift of three men. It's in the gift of John Bercow, the Speaker of the House of Lords, which I think is Norman Fowler or Lord Fowler, and then the Lord Great Chamberlain, and even I can't remember what his name is. So it's Boothroyd's point is it's not for Bercow to... If the Prime Minister decided not to invite him, every single point you've made would stand, but she's invited him already. So for Bercow to stick his oar in, I think is the idea is that it's procedurally and constitutionally wrong.
Is it? I mean, is there...
That's Betty Boothroyd's point.
Okay, but I think that I understood her point to be that he should be allowed because he's the representative of the United States, not because...
No, well, that as well. No, good point. Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's a twofold point, isn't it? So, A, she's saying it's not your job, John, and B, she's saying, in my view, he should be able to speak anyway because he's a representative of the American people.
Well, setting that second view aside, it seems to me that John Bercow has a job to do in order to convince his other colleagues to agree with him. I'm just saying that it doesn't make sense for somebody that is so clearly cruel and so clearly trying to organize things in such a way that, the world positioning is just appalling. He only speaks highly of autocrats and dictators, and he will...
They don't even return a favour. It looks like Putin's going to score a Kim Jong-un result while Donald Trump just looks the other way. You couldn't make it up, could you? But, yet, your lot vote for him.
He's against the Canadians,
everyone.
The French. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, so it just seems to me it makes sense to remember that it's a privilege and not a right. Yeah. That Theresa May expects him to come in. Well, don't even get me started on Theresa May.
No, I won't.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But, fine. I think it's fantastic that the Queen has not been able to see fit to have him stay at the palace.
Right, you're reading a lot into that. They're having some work done.
I love it.
They're having some work done. They don't have room.
I know.
Only had, last time I checked, Buckingham Palace only had 500 and odd rooms. So, we've all got our crosses to bear. Johnny, I've got to crack on because I'm trying to hit all my junctions as close to time as possible today as a tribute to my outgoing producer. So I look forward to your second call, which will probably be in about 6 years' time, will it?
Yeah, probably. Thanks.
Have a lovely weekend. It's 11:45. I'm glad we had this conversation. It's a tricky one, and it leaves me feeling a bit icky, to be honest with you, because I find the idea, obviously, of a self-confessed sex offender standing up in the British Parliament in Westminster Hall, pretending to care about soldiers, utterly repellent. And yet, I find Betty Boothroyd's account of why he should be allowed to, despite having dodged the draft 5 times, insulted the parents of a dead captain, insulted the service and the incarceration of John McCain, insulting disabled people, siding with Nazis, all of those things, he still represents American soldiers. He is Commander-in-Chief, isn't he? Oh, I do sometimes. I know I always say my favourite subjects are the ones where I don't know what to think, but oddly they're also my least favourite subjects. Is that cognitive dissonance? I don't know. Michael's in Salisbury. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
First-time callers. Yeah. So I'm ex-military. I served over 37 years, and I've been out now about 2 years.
Gosh.
I absolutely agree with Betty Boothroyd in terms of he does represent the country. He does represent soldiers that I've had the honour, and many other people have had the honour of serving alongside in many different parts of the world.
Yes.
And he absolutely should be given that platform. People can judge him as an individual. As an individual, I don't like him at all. I'm mixed race as well, so I really, really don't like him. But that doesn't matter. It's he is the commander-in-chief. He does represent others, and by giving him that platform, which he should have in his office, people can then judge him as an individual. And if they don't like him, they can make sure he doesn't receive the votes that he gets that keep him in power. And that's then an indictment of the American people as opposed to him.
Yeah, so, I guess what we miss, and I used to think, I probably still will when we finish this hour of the programme, that I'm above all this sort of thing, but you have to have a pungent opinion on everything. This is one of those examples where you think that doing what is right involves doing something you find really unpleasant. It can be right and unpleasant, can't it? It's not like a football team. You don't just cheer them. It's oh, God, of course, in an ideal world, he wouldn't be doing this, but in an ideal world, he wouldn't be president. In an ideal world, people wouldn't vote for self-confessed sex offenders and Nazi sympathisers and draft dodgers, but they did, and we've got to suck it up. But then, when do we stop sucking it up, Michael?
Yeah, but then people should stop sucking it up by making sure that they vote for someone who they do think...
But we don't have that power. We're looking at a foreign leader. How bad would they have to be? I mean, we put the King of Saudi, don't we? And I mean, it gets the right old red carpet treatment coming in. They crucified someone who was already dead this week in Saudi Arabia.
From my perspective, James, I think that if you had a country that, as a country, fundamentally was against our values and fundamentally against what we stand for, then I would say, then ban the leader of that country from speaking to us. But this is not the case. We have a country that have got lots of really, really good people that share our values, that have been side by side of us in armed conflict, that we look at as brothers in arms. I certainly do. And therefore, if that individual who you really, really don't like, but happens to be representing that country at that time, then that person should still receive that platform, because I would take rebuffing him as a rebuff of the American people, and I would never do that. In the same way that, I mean, I can't stand Boris Johnson, but if he ever become Prime Minister, I would still expect him to have the platform of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and I would take it as a personal rebuff from any other country that wouldn't allow that.
All of the most terrible things that have happened on our planet have happened because terrible people were not stopped. Because people like you and me did what we thought was honourable, and by doing what we thought was honourable, the profoundly dishonourable flourish. It's like Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance, wasn't it? Even a muesli knitting, sandal wearing hippie like me thinks that at some point you cannot tolerate other people's intolerance. There has to come a point where you say, no, that's not allowed. Unfortunately, we've gone in completely the opposite direction in recent years, and we're saying, yeah, of course you can say that, of course you can do that, of course you can sympathise with Nazis, of course you can boast about sexually assaulting, but at what point does it become intolerable, this kind of behaviour?
Yeah, that's really difficult.
Isn't it?
I don't think that we're at that point. I mean, when is that point? I don't know, but I don't look at it from my perspective that we're at that point, because he is representing the people. He's a deeply divisive character in his own country.
Yes.
And people will form their opinion, absolutely rightly, of that individual, as they should. And we can form our opinion of that individual as well. And
I hear you. I hear you.
I absolutely get that, yeah.
And I guess you and Johnny, the caller just before the break, set up the two positions perfectly. Of course, what we're not going to hear from today, I don't think, and I don't particularly want to, is people that don't think he's despicable, because by definition that they would be despicable too. You mentioned Boris Johnson, Michael did. I don't know what this text from Paul refers to. He writes, an egotistical sociopath with mad hair and no morals or principles could actually be the Prime Minister by the time Trump visits. Rebecca is in Warwick. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Sorry, I'm a little nervous, first-time caller.
It's only me.
My grandfather fought in the Second World War and was a prisoner of war for 4 years in Japan. Obviously, he survived, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Yes.
And I actually find the idea of that particular man representing the people that my grandfather fought alongside repulsive and offensive. I cannot understand on any level how someone who sympathises with and likes Nazis...
I know where you're going with this. He represents everything that your grandfather fought against.
Exactly. So whilst he is representing the people that fought alongside him, I don't think it should be that person. I just think the irony, the sickening irony in that is impossible. And to answer your question from earlier, the time to stop this is now. The time to stand up and say, actually, no, we're not going to just brush under the table or under the carpet or whatever this man's intolerance and inability to be human any longer. And I think the time is now.
And that's what I was trying to nudge with Michael, the last caller, was saying, where is the line? What does he have to do to be...
Well,
I guess the phrase is beyond the pale, isn't it, really? But then if they keep electing him in America, and America remain our allies, America announcing to the world they're cool with self-confessed sex-offending, draft-dodging, racist liars...
Good for them. We don't have to be.
Well, I don't know when the last time you had a look at British politics was, Rebecca.
I'm a staunch Remainer, so
yes.
I must follow it very, very well.
I hear you. I don't know on this one.
I can't. I'll be honest, I will just be mortally offended, and I don't actually believe...
Is there a compromise? Is that... Because the problem is, you've just highlighted the worst point. Well, yeah, but he speaks and everyone turns their back, or everyone gets up and walks out, but then are you insulting the people he represents rather than... So what he does, he represents two things in the context of this conversation. He represents Americans who fought alongside us in the Second World War...
Yeah.
And that's the office. But as an individual, he represents almost all of the values that we were fighting against. How the hell are you supposed to square that?
Well, I think you have to sit down and think, what makes me feel less sick? And to be honest with you, looking at that man and listening to him falsely and, ridiculously say things that I know he doesn't even believe would make me feel sick. And I think that would be more of an offence to everybody involved, especially those that fought the Nazis, than anything else. And I think that there has to be somebody else.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. It's a brilliant point. I'm not saying... I've changed from the beginning of the hour when I was saying we have to respect the office. It's the phrase Betty Boothroyd employed about being a representative of the American people who sent their sons to fight alongside us. But as Rebecca points out, with reference to her POW grandfather... They were fighting against precisely the sort of stuff that Donald Trump represents. Jeff's in Broxbourne with what will probably be the last word on this. Rebecca, that was a brilliant debut. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. Lovely to talk to you. First-time caller.
You're very well.
It's really just a sort of middle line on what's been said before.
Oh, good.
I'm completely opposed to Trump, obviously, for all the reasons you've said and many more. The problem I've got is I was a civil servant for well over 30 years, and the first thing you're taught as a civil servant is that you are apolitical.
Yes, of course.
And regardless of whether you voted for them or not, you will do
the best job you can.
Government tells you to do, exactly. So the problem I've got is if this government has made the appalling decision, well, if Theresa May has made the appalling decision to invite Trump, unfortunately, Burko only has two options. He either accepts it begrudgingly or he drops out of the post and resigns.
So I think this is Betty Boothroyd as well would say he's getting too big. He's overreaching himself on this.
Absolutely, and particularly with the whole Brexit thing going on, he has to be cleaner than clean when it comes to impartiality. He's already under criticism, but unfairly, I think. But he has to be cleaner than clean and just say, "Look, I am an impartial referee."
It'd be nice if someone could say, Donald Trump is here today to represent the soldiers who fought alongside us in the Second World War against, and then a long list of things that obviously Donald Trump is in favour of, a long list of all the ideological positions he'd adopt, which would be a lot closer to the Nazis than they would be to Western liberal democracies. But that's not going to happen. Send a memo to John Burko.
It's not. I mean, I have visited Parliament, and it's one of those places that you think the idea of Donald Trump entering that building and speaking is quite appalling.
Yeah, although I have to acknowledge, and I may rue the day when I decided to keep acknowledging there are plenty of people within our democracy who will welcome him and be delighted to see him here. Not just despite, this is what breaks my heart as a patriotic Brit, not just despite of all the disgusting things that he's done, but because of all the disgusting things that he's done.